about this and a few other issues, we'd like to welcome now back to the program Dr. Raywat Deonandan, an epidemiologist with the University of Ottawa. Professor, good morning.
Good morning.
So, it occurs to me that COVID complacency, COVID fatigue is obviously a very real thing. We're only human and we are meant to, be out and about. We're social creatures. We evolved that way. Are you worried as an epidemiologist that people are just going to get tired of, rule following?
Oh, yeah, 100%. We're seeing it already, right? And it doesn't help that there's the ongoing misinformation narrative that the crisis has abated or never existed in the first place, or that the sheep stay home and they should follow their own internal guidance, whatever the narrative might be. But yeah, the fatigue is a real thing, and we don't really know how to combat it from a communication standpoint yet. As I'm fond of saying, we're rewriting the public health communications textbook in real time in the wake of this epidemic.
Yeah, you sort of touched on public health messaging and the comms aspect of this the last time we spoke, Professor. And how can better messaging kind of help here? And do you think, well, let me qualify that. Do you think the messaging has been good thus far? And I would just stick to Ontario.
So there's a challenge here, right? So early on, the messaging was really panic mongering, which was important early on because we were not sure what we were dealing with, and the threat was real. The numbers were cascading at enormous rates, and people were terrified of their fellow human being and terrified to go outside. We had to modify that message when the economy started to open up. So right now, there's a delicate balancing act. We have the messaging from the industry saying, hey, the restaurants and bars are safe. We've put in place all these measures to keep you safe. Come spend your money. That's an important message. On the other hand, we have the public health message that's trying to say the disease isn't gone, and you have to maintain your distances and keep safe and be careful. So balancing the two is tricky because there's some conflicting content in those two approaches. And what I'm finding, I think, is that people are choosing which pole of that message to gravitate towards based upon which one satisfies their personal agenda. So if I desperately need to socialize, well, the bars are safe, I'm going to go socialize. Or if I'm really concerned about the economy and keeping things open, I'm terrified of the bars, I'm going to stay home. Finding that balance between the two is critical and difficult.
So would better messaging be more along the lines of, okay, the bars are open, but the virus is still out there, so stay home if you can, but if you can't and you want to have a pint, be smart about it?
That's a good way of putting it. I like thinking about Viktor Frankl and Uncle Ben from Spider-Man, who said essentially the same thing. With great power comes great responsibility. In a liberal democracy, the great power is our freedom. So with the open economy now, we have the freedom to go have that pint, which is fantastic. You have the freedom to stay home and socialize, which is good. The responsibility here is not to express that power flagrantly and without deep thought, because it could affect the lives of other people. So that aspect of the messaging has been lost to some extent. I think there is a demographic that will respond to that message of potential Spider-Man-esque heroism, that if you can delay your need to socialize at a large scale, maybe we can keep the economy open longer, and maybe you can save some lives. So balancing that, hey, things are serious and things are scary and things are safe against this other message that you can do the right thing to keep your society healthy. That's the balancing act.
What should we be saying in particular to the under 40 crowd? Because they seem to be a driver in some of the more recent increases in confirmed cases that we've had.
I'm fond of talking about this as a societal level marshmallow experiment. So if you're familiar with basic psychology, Psych 101, the marshmallow experiment is when you give a child a marshmallow and say, you can eat this now, or you wait an hour and I'll give you 2 marshmallows. And the child that can delay gratification gets rewarded with the additional marshmallow. At a societal level, if we can delay our need for mass socialization, the marshmallow that we get is an open economy lasting for several months. So everyone benefits. So if we can balance the carrot and the stick, as I call it. The stick is scolding the bad people from the podium. You've been bad, you've been irresponsible, or even using the extreme stick of the law, of sending bylaw officers to give people tickets. The carrot, though, is explaining that there is something to be gained here. you can keep the economy open, you can keep your job, you can keep your kids going to school if you delay gratification, in addition to that heroism angle I talked about earlier. So having that multiplicity of messaging is kind of key, and targeting it to the appropriate demographics. We've learned this looking at the anti-smoking campaign and the seatbelt campaign. The one-size-fits-all approach does not give the effects that we want.
And lastly, Professor, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the regular flu. And with regular influenza season, coming up just really around the corner, there is some hope. And we've seen this in some of the Southern Hemisphere jurisdictions like Australia, that with some of the measures that we've undertaken with respect to COVID, it will impact the regular flu season positively, in that our infection rates are expected to go down. Do you believe that to be the case here?
I 100% expect this to be one of the best flu seasons we've had in a very long time, because of the things you mentioned. People are washing their hands, they're keeping away from each other, which is how you get these diseases. And I think we're going to have a record uptake of the flu vaccine this year, because people are now public health minded, which is inspiring. And it shows us that maybe there's some positives coming out of this epidemic that may be long term. We care more about public health. We take respiratory diseases more seriously. We respect vaccines a bit more, maybe. So, yeah, I think this will be one of our better flu seasons for a while.
Professor, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
That again, Dr. Raywat Deonandan, an epidemiologist with the University of Ottawa.